They hate you right now, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped reacting. And that silence, it broke something inside them. Here's what nobody tells you about going quiet. Your peace is their punishment. Stay with me. Because by the end of this, you will never feel the need to explain yourself again. Before we go deeper, I need to ask you something. Is there someone in your life right now who is waiting for you to react? Someone who has been pushing, provoking, testing your patience, hoping you will explode so they can point at the wreckage and say, see, that's who they really are. Most people have been conditioned to believe that silence means you have nothing to say, that you couldn't find the words, or worse, that you accepted defeat. Society trains us from childhood to respond, to defend, to explain ourselves the moment we feel questioned or threatened. Speaking up is framed as courage. Going quiet is framed as weakness. And that conditioning is exactly what your enemies are counting on. But here is what the truly powerful understand that the reactive majority never figures out. The person who does not need to respond holds all the cards. When someone attacks you, publicly or privately, they are extending an invitation. They want you at the table. They want your energy, your emotion, your justification. Because as long as you are explaining yourself, you are operating inside their frame, playing by their rules, on a battlefield they designed for you. The moment you withdraw that energy, not in bitterness, not in cowardice, but in complete indifference, you collapse their entire structure. You cannot win a war against someone who refuses to show up for it. And that refusal is not passivity. It is a deeply conscious, almost surgical act of dominance. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect. They are rarely the loudest. They rarely chase, correct, or over-explain. There is a settled quality about them, a gravitational stillness that makes others orbit them rather than the other way around. That stillness is not accidental. It is the outward signal of someone who has nothing to prove, and people feel that signal whether they can name it or not. When you stop reacting, you stop confirming that their opinion of you has any resonance inside your world. You are not suppressing yourself. You are simply operating from a level where their noise no longer reaches. That is not defeat wrapped in silence. That is the cleanest, most undeniable form of power a human being can demonstrate. The power of someone who has already won the only war that ever mattered, the one inside themselves. When someone attempts to embarrass you, in a room full of people, on a public platform, or even in a quiet conversation designed to make you feel small, understand that what is happening has almost nothing to do with you. The attack feels personal. It is designed to feel personal. But shame as a weapon is never really about its target. It is about the person wielding it and the desperate internal war they are losing behind closed doors. People who reach for shame as a tool are people who live in it. They know its geography intimately because they walk through it daily. They understand exactly how it feels to be exposed, judged, found lacking, because that is their private, unspoken experience of themselves. And rather than sitting with that unbearable weight alone, the mind finds relief in a cruel but very human trick. If I can make someone else feel this, then for a moment I am above it. For a moment, I am the one holding the torch instead of standing in the fire. This is projection in its rawest form. The humiliation they aim at you is borrowed from their own inner experience. The specific things they mock, your ambition, your appearance, your past, your silence, your growth, are almost always the exact things they feel most ashamed of within themselves. Not consciously. They would deny it completely. But the intensity of their need to diminish you is a precise measurement of their own self-contempt. Here is what this means for you practically. When you internalize someone else's shame, when you carry it home, replay it at night, let it edit your behavior, you are absorbing a wound that was never yours to begin with. You became the dumping ground for someone else's unprocessed pain. And the antidote is not to fire shame back at them. It is to recognize the weapon for what it is, set it down, and walk away clean. Their embarrassment of you is a confession. You just have to be calm enough to hear it correctly. There is something quietly unsettling that happens when you become the target of someone's disproportionate rage. The anger feels too large for the moment. The criticism feels too specific, too charged, too personal to be purely about you, and that is because it isn't. What you are witnessing in those moments is not someone reacting to who you are, it is someone reacting to who they are, using your face as the screen. Every human being carries within them a hidden interior, a collection of traits, impulses, desires, and failures they cannot accept about themselves. The parts that feel too shameful to acknowledge, too dangerous to admit, too ugly to bring into the light. And so rather than confronting those parts directly, the mind buries them, locks them away, pretends they do not exist. But buried things do not disappear. They pressure build in the dark, and eventually they must find an exit. That exit is almost always another person. The traits that trigger the loudest, most visceral reaction in someone are nearly always the traits they have exiled from their own self-image. The person who screams about your arrogance is quietly suffocating under their own crushed ambition. The one who attacks your freedom is imprisoned by choices they were too afraid to make. The one who mocks your healing journey has wounds they have never once looked directly at. They do not see you. They see the version of themselves they most fear becoming, or the version they secretly wish they could be. This is why your calm enrages them further. You were supposed to confirm their projection by breaking down, by proving you are as flawed as they need you to be. When you remain steady, when you refuse to perform the collapse they scripted for you, the projection loses its surface. It bounces back. And now they must sit with the thing they threw at you because you did not catch it. Your peace does not just unsettle them. It returns their own unfinished business directly to their door. Every time you respond to someone who is trying to destabilize you, you are signing a contract you did not read carefully enough. You are agreeing in the most visible way possible that their words carry enough weight to move you, that their opinion has an address inside your nervous system, that they hold a key to something in you, and all they have to do is turn it to watch you open. Most people hand that key over without a second thought because reacting feels natural, feels justified, feels like self-respect. But there is a critical difference between defending your truth and feeding someone's need for control over your emotional state. When a person provokes you, whether through insult, dismissal, public humiliation, or quiet manipulation, they are running a test. The test is not about the content of what they said. The content is almost irrelevant. The test is about access. Can I get inside this person? Can I pull a reaction from them? Can I prove to myself and to whoever is watching that I have power over their inner world? The moment you react with anger, with hurt, with frantic explanation, you answer that test with a resounding yes. And once someone knows the answer is yes, they will keep running the same test forever. This is not about becoming emotionally numb or pretending that cruelty does not land. Feeling something is human and unavoidable. The work is in the gap between feeling and responding, that narrow, sovereign space where you get to decide whether what just happened earns a reaction from you at all. Most people have never been taught that this space exists. They move from trigger to response in a fraction of a second, as if the reaction were involuntary, as if they had no choice. But the choice is always there. It simply requires a level of self-possession that most people never develop because nobody ever told them it was possible. Withholding your reaction is not suppression. It is the quiet, unannounced withdrawal of permission, and nothing communicates power more completely than that. When you remove yourself from the equation, when you stop arguing, stop justifying, stop showing up to a battle someone else declared, something deeply uncomfortable begins to happen to the person who started it. The noise they aimed at you has nowhere to go. The energy they built up, the narrative they rehearsed, the audience they imagined, all of it suddenly has no target. And in that sudden, unexpected stillness, they are left alone with the one person they have been expertly avoiding their entire life, themselves. This is the part nobody warns you about when they tell you to rise above. It is not just a strategic move. It is psychologically devastating to the person on the receiving end of your silence, precisely because most people are completely unequipped for self-confrontation. The average person fills every quiet moment with noise, with distraction, with conflict, with the business of managing other people's perceptions, because silence means they might have to hear their own thoughts. And their own thoughts are not kind. They know what they have done. They know who they have been. They know the gap between the person they perform publicly and the person who exists when no one is watching. Your engagement was giving them an escape route from that knowledge. As long as they could focus their energy outward on discrediting you, provoking you, making you the problem, they never had to turn the lens inward. You were the distraction that kept them from their own reckoning. The moment you withdraw that distraction, the reckoning arrives uninvited and cannot be postponed. This is why silence feels like punishment to them, even though you are doing nothing. You are not attacking. You are not retaliating. You are simply no longer available as a hiding place. And the person who built their entire emotional architecture around avoiding themselves will experience that unavailability as one of the most destabilizing forces they have ever encountered. You did not punish them with words. You punished them with the one thing they feared most, the unbearable, uninterrupted company of their own conscience. There is a reason the most respected figures across every culture, every era, every tradition share one visible quality above all others. They are unmoved when everything around them demands movement. Not cold, not indifferent, not disconnected from the reality of what is happening, but rooted in something so deep inside themselves that the turbulence of the external world cannot reach the floor of who they are. That quality is not personality. It is not a gift some people are born with and others are not. It is the result of a long, private, often painful process of learning to hold yourself together when every nerve in your body is screaming at you to fall apart. From an evolutionary standpoint, the organism that can delay response has a profound survival advantage over the one that cannot. The animal that freezes before it flees makes better decisions than the one that bolts at the first sound. The warrior who can absorb an insult without flinching controls the tempo of the entire encounter. The negotiator who can sit in uncomfortable silence longer than the person across the table will almost always walk away with more. Restraint is not the absence of strength. It is strength held in reserve, which is the most dangerous kind because nobody can measure what they cannot see expressed. What makes emotional restraint so powerful in human dynamics specifically is that it is extraordinarily rare. Most people are entirely at the mercy of their emotional reflexes. They have never done the interior work required to create distance between what they feel and what they do with that feeling. So when they encounter someone who can absorb provocation, pressure, and pain without visibly fracturing, they do not experience it as calmness. They experience it as dominance. Something ancient and instinctual in them recognizes that they are in the presence of a person who has mastered the hardest frontier any human being can conquer. That frontier is not the world outside. It has always been the volatile, ungoverned territory within. And the one who rules there rules everything else quietly, completely, and without ever raising their voice. There is a performance of humility that circulates in the world that has nothing to do with genuine modesty and everything to do with strategy. You have seen it. The person who publicly minimizes you, who questions your capability with a smile, who packages their doubt in the language of concern. I just want to be realistic with you. I'm only saying this because I care. And then, when your silence or your success makes their prediction look foolish, suddenly softens, suddenly becomes gracious, suddenly finds words of support they never offered when you needed them. That softening is not humility. It is recalibration. What happened is not that they changed. What happened is that the power dynamic shifted and they felt it. The people who were embarrassed by your silence, who expected your reaction and received nothing, who watched you grow without the validation they assumed you required, they were not humbled in the spiritual sense of the word. They were exposed. Their expectation that you would remain small, remain reactive, remain dependent on their approval, was built on an image of you that you had quietly outgrown. And when reality refused to match that image, the gap between what they predicted and what actually happened made them look, to themselves and to others, profoundly wrong. That wrongness is what they are now trying to quietly absorb and reframe. The sudden respect, the revised tone, the unexpected acknowledgement of your worth, these are not gifts freely given. They are debts reluctantly paid. They are the natural consequence of someone who bet against you being forced to settle the account. This matters because it reframes how you receive that belated recognition. You do not owe it warmth. You do not owe it the intimacy of someone who was there from the beginning. You can receive it with grace, with dignity, with complete emotional neutrality, because you already know what it cost them to give it, and you already know it arrived not because they finally saw your value, but because your value finally became impossible to deny. There is a particular kind of silence that follows transformation. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who no longer needs to announce themselves. When you have done the real work, the interior work, the kind that happens in the hours nobody sees and the moments nobody applauds, something fundamental changes in how you carry yourself. You stop seeking the room's approval before you enter it. You stop editing yourself down to fit the ceiling someone else built above your head. And that change, quiet as it is absolutely deafening to the people who constructed their entire relationship with you around a version of you that no longer exists. People invest in your limitations, not always consciously, not always maliciously, but genuinely and deeply. When someone has known you at your lowest, your most uncertain, your most dependent, they build an internal model of who you are based on that version. They make predictions. They tell stories about you to others and to themselves that are rooted in what they observed during your most vulnerable chapters. And those predictions carry a subtle, unspoken comfort for them because as long as you remain where they placed you, their own position feels secure by comparison. Your growth does not just surprise them. It destabilizes the entire architecture of how they understood the relationship between your life and theirs. Every level you reach that they privately believed was beyond you becomes a quiet indictment of their judgment. Every door that opens for you is a reminder of the door they told you, directly or indirectly, was closed. They are not embarrassed by your success in isolation. They are embarrassed by the distance between what they predicted and what you became, and that distance is a mirror they did not ask to look into. This is why your silence through the process was so essential. You were not building for the announcement. You were not growing to prove a point. You were simply becoming, steadily, privately, without permission, the person they never calculated for. And that miscalculation is entirely, irreversibly theirs.